Hello, folks, and welcome back to Words of Wisdom. Today, we're actually talking about something that I think every single one of us struggles with at some point, and that is self sabotage. So, today I want to talk about the small habits that end self sabotage. And when I say self sabotage, I want to ask you, what comes to mind? Because maybe you're thinking, about procrastination. Maybe you're hitting snooze one too many times, which I have been guilty of. Maybe you're overspending when you promise yourself you save. Also been guilty of that. Or maybe it's that habit of, talking yourself out of opportunities before you even start. So here's the thing. Self-sabotage is one of the biggest reasons people don't reach their goals. Not because they aren't capable, not because they aren't smart enough or talented enough, but because they're tripping themselves up with small daily habits that work against them. And look, I get it, because I've been there, I've been in debt, I've felt stuck, I've told myself, who do you think you are to want more? And for a long time, I didn't realize I was actually sabotaging myself. And it wasn't until, I started to see those little daily habits for what they were, they were almost like tiny acts of self betrayal. When I realized that, that's when everything changed. So today we're going to break it down, what self-sabotage really is. I get tongue twisted every time I say that. But anyway, why we do it, how it impacts us, and most importantly, how you can actually overcome it and start building small habits that move you forward instead of holding you back. And I'm going to keep this really, really practical and really relatable, because the truth is, success is built on the small things. And if you can master the small things, you can completely change your life. So let's start with what is self-sabotage? So let's just start at the beginning. Yeah. Self-sabotage is when your actions don't actually match your goals. So it's when you say you want one thing, but your behavior is pointing you in the opposite direction. And for me, I call that the know and doing gap. All right. So it's a little bit like, pressing your foot on the accelerator and the brake at the same time. You're putting in the effort, but you're not actually moving anywhere. Just try to imagine that you're trying to fill a bucket with water and you keep pouring more and more in. And I've talked about this on previous podcasts, but imagine there's a small hole at the bottom and there's water coming out. Like, that's self-sabotage. The hole is tiny, almost unnoticeable, but over time it drains everything that you've actually worked for. And self-sabotage, it shows up in different ways. So it can show up as procrastination. You know what needs to be done, but you delay doing it. And this is one thing I've been really trying to work on. This is why I have to-do lists for everything, because it forces me to get that little tick to tick it off so that I stop delaying doing things. Other forms of it are like overcommitting, saying yes to everything, but saying yes when you mean no, and then resenting the fact that you said yes to it in the first place. Scrolling on your phone instead of sleeping or working. Starting and stopping projects without ever finishing them. Spend money to treat yourself when deep down it's actually avoidance. Or maybe it's you say you want to lose the weight, but you're eating the cake. And here's the truth about it. It isn't always loud and dramatic. Most of the time it's quiet, and it hides inside those little habits that you almost brush off as, oh, it's just how I am. But those little habits, over time add up and become your identity. And our identity is then, that's the person that we become. And sometimes, and this is really important, understand self-sabotage isn't laziness. It's actually, and if you link it back to the previous podcast that I've spoken about the nervous system, it's actually your nervous system stepping in. When success feels unfamiliar, your body registers it as unsafe. And what feels unsafe, we resist. Often, sabotage is actually self-protection. We're trying to protect ourselves because we feel unsafe. So let's talk about why we do it, because let's be real, nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to sabotage myself today. All right. It's a little bit deeper than that. And here are some of the biggest reasons. The first one is fear of failure. If I don't try it, I can't fail. The best way is to avoid it. Okay. I get this a lot. So I do, in business, people are signing up to something, or they want to change career, but then when they receive an opportunity, then they don't follow through on it, because in their head they're afraid of failing. So it's better not to, to change career or to try something new, because if I don't try it, then I won't fail at it. The other thing is fear of success. As much as it sounds ironic, a lot of people have that fear of, what if I achieve it, but then if I lose it all? Or what if I achieve it and then people expect even more of me? Another one is low self-worth. That little voice that says who do you think you are, and to want this. And I felt that a lot. So I did in the beginning of when I started doing the podcast and even like posting online and stuff, like in my head going, who's even going to listen to me? Like, who would even who would listen to my podcast? Who would watch any of my videos or anything like that there? And that came from just low self-worth and that little voice in my head. The other one then is, the comfort in the familiar. Your nervous system craves certainty. And even if certainty means staying stuck, and I always say staying within your comfort zone is where your dreams die. And most people never get out of their comfort zone. They live the same year over and over on repeat until they die, but it's because it actually feels familiar to stay stuck in opposed to getting uncomfortable. And I remember I had a mentor years ago and they actually said to me, they said and Sharon, if you don't learn to feel uncomfortable, then you're never moving forward and you're not developing. Look, to give you a little bit of a personal, example for me, when I was in debt, there were times when I kept spending, when I should have been actually saving or not spending. If you look at it on the surface, it made no sense. I wanted to get out of the debt, but deep down, I was sabotaging because it felt safer to stay in the struggle I knew than to face the unknown of financial freedom. Even though I always said that I wanted financial freedom, I was still it still felt unsafe because I'd never been there before. So imagine you're running a marathon, but you're wearing ankle weights. You're doing the work, but you're dragging resistance with you. That's what self-sabotage does. And just let me be really, really clear. Self-sabotage is not who you are. It's not your personality. It's simply a habit that you've practiced. And if you've practiced it, you can unpractice it. So how does self-sabotage, impact us, and what is the real cost of it? Financially, it's going to keep you broke. Maybe it looks like overspending. Maybe it's avoiding, doing budgets or not investing in yourself because you're afraid it won't work. Emotionally, it keeps you trapped in guilt, shame, and frustration. That cycle of why do I keep doing this to myself? Career-wise, it keeps you in jobs you've outgrown or saying no to opportunities because you're scared to fail. And here's the kicker. Self-sabotage robs you of time. Every time you procrastinate, that's not just a lost hour. That's momentum lost. That's confidence lost. It's you not trusting yourself. So I want you to ask yourself, what's one area of your life where you're self-sabotaging right now, and what's the cost of that? I remember being at a conference years ago in Abu Dhabi, and there was a motivational speaker speaking at it, and he talked about the fact, generally speaking, we do everything other than the thing that we need to do. That always keeps coming back to me. When I find myself starting to self-sabotage, I look at it, what is the one thing I'm avoiding doing that I actually really need to do? And that's where I need to go to, in opposed to normally what we do is we do everything else other than the thing that we need to do. And we busy ourselves because we're feeling busy. So that makes us feel comfortable. But if you were to actually stop the procrastination, stop the self-sabotaging and just face up to the one thing that you need to do, you would notice your results change almost immediately, but massively as well. So all this is well and good, but I suppose the bottom line is everyone wants to know, how do you overcome self-sabotage? So let's just talk about the solutions, because this isn't about shaming yourself. It's about awareness and it's about action. I'm going to give you 6 steps so that you can start breaking free from self-sabotage. The first one is awareness. And what I mean by that is catching the habit. You can't change what you don't see. Self-sabotage is like background noise. You don't notice it until you stop and listen. And I'm actually going to do this week. Keep a self-sabotage log for 1 week. Every time you notice yourself procrastinating, overspending, overcommitting, write it down. Awareness is step number 1. And as I said, I'm going to do it this week because sometimes I do fall back into old habits and I have to catch myself. If you're looking for your copy of the self-sabotage log, it's the first link in the description. The second thing then is replace, don't remove. If you pull weeds out of garden, you've got to plant flowers in their place. Otherwise, the weeds grow back. Let me say, for example, let's say you normally scroll when you're stressed. Replace it with a 5-minute walk or a breathing exercise. Maybe you go for the glass of wine when you've had a stressful day. Well, maybe now you go for a walk, or you go to the gym, or you ring a friend, or you go to a Pilates class. So don't remove it completely, replace it with somebody else, because that'll be easier for you to create the routine and the habit. So the third way is regulate your nervous system. I've already ran 2 podcasts on that. If you haven't watched those, I'll put a little tag here so that you can watch it there. Just remember, your nervous system is like the thermostat of your life. You'll only allow in as much success as feels safe for you. So this is why I ground myself. This is why I drink water with electrolytes. This This is why I do Pilates, to release emotion. This is why I say no when I need to. These small practices tell my body it's safe to succeed. And when I feel myself in a heightened emotional state, I double down on all that good stuff. Number 4 is to understand micro habits that build self trust. Confidence isn't built by big gestures, it's built by keeping small promises to yourself. So 2 minutes of journaling, laying out your work clothes for the next morning, going to the gym when you said you were going to, drinking water, instead of the coffee. When I was building my business, it wasn't just one huge action, it was hundreds of small little acts of consistency. The 5th one is environment and boundaries. Your environment is either feeding your habits or it's fighting them. So like if you're on a diet and you've got junk food in the house, well then every time, like you're in the kitchen, you're negotiating. So you are with yourself of whether you'll have it or you won't. So remove the decision. And for me, like learning to say no to people, to distractions. For me, that really changed everything. And it's certainly, I've covered this a lot on this podcast and I've done the TED talk on being a product of your environment. But like, I sometimes think because people lack the self-awareness around it, they don't realize how much their environment is actually damaging them. And then the 6th one is accountability and support. We do sabotage in silence, but we heal in community. So it is really, really important to have, whether that's a mentor, whether you join a group, maybe it's a coach, but having someone to reflect your blind spots back to you, this is what accelerates change, I believe. I wouldn't have grown to 7 figures without support, without mentors, without coaching. And here's the encouragement. It's not about never self-sabotaging again. It's about catching it quicker. It's shifting it sooner. And it's building resilience so you don't keep falling into the same patterns. So just to wrap this up, just remember self-sabotage isn't who you are. It's just simply a habit. And it's just like any habit. You can unlearn it and replace it with something stronger. So remember, the first thing always, and this is why I always say self-awareness is a superpower. Catch it with awareness. Start to become more aware of your little habits. Replace it with something that's supportive. So don't remove it. Replace it with something that's supportive. Regulate your nervous system in whatever way you feel, whether that's grounding, whether that's going to the gym, whether that's electrolytes. Because if you do that, success is going to feel safe. Build micro habits that create self-trust. Shape your environment and then lean in on accountability. Find an accountability partner. Find somebody that's going to hold you to account. The life you want, remember, is built on the small things. Those tiny daily choices that no one sees, they compound. And if I could recommend a book, and I was actually talking to some guys on a mentor call this morning. There's a book by a guy called Darren Hardy called The Compound Effect. Okay. And if you're struggling with any of this stuff, I would highly, highly recommend that you go purchase that book because it is pretty mind blowing. So my challenge to you is this. What's one self-sabotaging habit you're going to replace this week? Just one, because one small habit can change everything. Thank you so much for listening to this today. Thank you for going out and doing the work. If this resonated, share it, with a friend or with somebody that needs to hear it. You are capable, you are worthy, and you don't have to keep standing in your own way. So until next time, keep going, keep growing.